sorry about the delay on that. My name is Greg King, and I've brought a colleague along with me today, Daniel Lansell. I've had a bit of a long association with industrial hemp because prior to working for the department, I worked for Victorian Farmers Federation as their land care manager for 10 years. And it was at that period of the Victorian Farmers Federation that legislation was passed to allow hemp to be grown in Victoria. It was headed up by a guy called John Blackstock, and there were members of Victoria Police, forensic people, DPI for the regulatory side, Department of Human Services, forensic laboratory people, and there was a cast of thousands in terms of sort of heavy-hitting bureaucrats who were very, very senior in their positions, because this industrial hemp was licensed under the Drugs and Poisons Act, which had carriage from the Department of Human Services. DPI was involved for regulatory reasons because the department has, under the Plant Health and Plant Products Act, biosecurity regulatory abilities, but the Department of Human Services had the Drugs and Poisons Act. So DHS decided in their wisdom that they would handball the industrial hemp stuff to DPI, which means that DPI, we work under our own act, but we also work under the DHS stuff. So that's where the complications come into people being able to gain authority to actually grow industrial hemp. Now, with this presentation, I'm only going to cover the approval process that a person or a business has to go through. So you are able to gain an authority to possess, process, sell or supply cannabis seed which has been harvested from low THC cannabis. Or the authority can let you cultivate and possess cannabis seed, which has obviously been harvested from low THC, or to possess, process, sell or supply cannabis which is free of leaves and flowering heads and does not contain THC in excess of 1%.
0.1% or 1%?
0.1%. Sorry, did I say 1%?
Yes.
Thank you.
Everybody excited?
With the THC.
So DPI administers the industrial hemp licensing. So that's where the legislation is. That's the DPI bit about regulating permits and authorities. And just to remind you that Victoria was the first Australian state to allow growing of low THC hemp.
That is the only state that isn't.
Yeah.
That is the only state that isn't growing it. It was the first to, as you say, allow it, but
Yep.
still managed to haven't got any grown yet.
Well, it did grow a few in the 90s, but at the moment, and probably since when Adrian's probably got a better idea than I have, but I'd say probably since about 2002.
I think that would be, I think 2001 was our last crop in Victoria.
That would be the last time. But there are 2 active licences in Victoria, and obviously Fred's got one. And
Sean Bailey.
yeah, there's another guy who has got one. And his situation is a bit interesting in that he applied for a licence with every intention of planting, and then it was the middle of the drought, so couldn't access water. He renewed the licence, and the land he was going to use properly went under plant, so he's got a licence, but nothing has been planted as yet.
But he can use that licence on other land, can't he?
What do you mean by other land?
Well, if we were to supply a contract farmer, and we have in mind a biodynamic farmer who couldn't get a licence before, we could use Sean's licence on that land.
Provided
Well, the farmer had nothing to do with it.
yeah. So there's two ways of looking at that one. Potentially, yes, if the licence holder wanted to go that way, but we'd probably want to licence the landholder as well, because the landholder would unavoidably be in contact with the crop.
What if he leases the land to the grower?
Probably, we've got to look at each case individually, be really specific about it. When we talk about leased land, is the owner going to be on the property or have any access to or any responsibility for?
Like fences?
Like fences, like being there, because if you're leasing a place in farming terms, it's unlikely the person who is leasing the place will live on the place. It's not unheard of, but it is more unlikely because people tend to live somewhere else and lease land around. So each case is going to have to be looked at on its individual merits.
I thought it was peculiar to the person, not the property.
Yes and no, because previous times we've had some peculiarities, and interpretations can mean that, yes, it's the person applying for the licence, but if the property holder or property owner is going to be there or have any contact with or has any responsibility to, it can get confusing. So that's the authorisation process. Completion and submission of required documentation, and that sort of really identifies who you are, where you are, who else you're going to have involved, and what you're going to do. Is it for research purposes or commercial purposes? And we actually do like to see a business plan so that we can trace the crop and the product through from start to finish. We need to do a site and facility inspection to make sure that the site is in a reasonable area, to ensure that there's storage facilities, lockable storage facilities available on the premises. We obviously have an interview with the person who's applying. And that sort of flows into an application pre-approval, which is also covered off by the police certificate, because everyone applying has to pass the National Police Check. Now, interestingly, with DPI, police checks sort of go back, is it 3 years or for a fair way, Daniel? Can you remember?
What do you mean? Oh, the legislation for police checks? I'm not sure.
For DPI, I think ours is different to the Department of Human Services. So when you go for a police check to grow industrial hemp, they go back 10 years. I think for us and DPI, we can go back.
I think you just use a standard police check.
Well, there actually isn't any such thing as a standard police check, which I found out, and I think Robert's probably found out too. I've had discussions with the National Police Register, and on all Victorian licence applications now, they will say this is for an industrial hemp licence, because there is some confusion over what a police check is, under whose authority it's being asked for. So then the Secretary's got to read a briefing note that is drafted up, which says, yes, you are an appropriate person and your business is an appropriate business to grant to be granted an authority.
What secretary is that?
The Secretary of Department of Primary Industries, who, as of last week, I think is Jeff Rosenthal. And then the authority is issued, and they're issued for 3 years. That's the sort of documentation that must be supplied by the business. As you can see,
Can you make it bigger? You know how you do the slideshow group?
yep. Imagine, bloody last on the phone.
This would be on the website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what I'm saying.
Understood.
And it says each application must be accompanied by an application fee. Now, the application for a new licence is $300. And usually you send that in. Now, if you send in the cheque with the application, traditionally I hold on to the cheque to ensure that the application is going to proceed. Because quite often applications don't proceed, in which case I prefer to return the cheque to you.
So Greg, in this case, you can store seed on your property.
In Victoria, assuming you've got the appropriate authority, yes, you can store seed on your property. But it must be a lockable container, lockable storage.
Yep.
And when we do the inspection of the property, that's one of the things that's got to be ticked off on the checklist.
And does that mean you can also process hemp seed or hemp plant components on the property in that 3-year period?
Assuming you've got a licence, yes. Yep. Which would make it easier for machinery like John's, for example. Come on site, but he'll obviously have a licence from Queensland or New South. Who are you licensed under?
Everyone but Vic.
So I'm curious as to why a lockable storage is required when it's low THC.
That's what's stipulated under Drugs and Poisons Act. Well, that's what they asked for, so that's what we
That's
do.
not for a policeman, that would be all.
So your initial inspection, there it mentions location, facilities, security standards. Multiple sites require multiple applications.
Well, within the one title, multiple sites being what?
Multiple sites being,
Multiple
using the example of leased land, you're a farmer here, you own this land, and
So does the application cover one title or one
well,
address?
a site is where you're doing whatever you're doing.
Yes.
But if you're doing it on another site,
Which is the next door paddock?
well, that would be considered, a next door paddock, I think, would be considered the same site, right?
You need to be
Because-
continuous piece of land. So if you've got a paddock here and then down the road you've got another paddock, that'd be 2 separate applications. If it's one continuous piece of land you're farming, it'll be 1 application. Even though
Farming or farming for hemp?
farming, so
Farming for hemp.
Yeah.
So either side of the property, different application.
I think so, that's the way I look at it.
Well, originally when we did this application, it was because, when this was drawn up, it was because there were many people who wanted to grow hemp, but they were linked to the same researcher or the same equipment manufacturer, and it ended up that sometimes the manufacturer held a license because he wanted to experiment on different crops, therefore he needed different people to grow the crops. So you're looking at it from a farming point of view, which is quite reasonable, but originally it came about because people wanted access to multiple sites.
What's the security standard?
For seed storage or for crop growing. Well, for seed storage, lockable. And what we're trying to do is not make it obvious. Most farmers have a lockable shed somewhere or a container or something like that. So it's as long as it can be locked away and out of sight. We're not asking for it like the gun licensing people do, where you have to have bloody great safe, seed here, a key over there, and all that sort of thing. We're not trying to do that. Also, in our regulations, VHS regulations, it talks about sites being signposted. Now, DPI has always had a bit of an issue with that, because if you want to get industrial hemp accepted as a relatively normal thing to do, and we from an agricultural point of view, it should be treated as a crop like other crops. We wouldn't really necessarily want to signpost it. It is just another crop. But under DHS legislation, they talk about identifying it or signposting it as a crop. They also like to see keep out signs put on fences and things like that.
When you say, when you say fence, do you mean like a really tall, high barbed wire fence? Like,
No, I think fence under the DPI Act means stop-proof.
okay.
So, no, we're not saying it's got to be a deer fence or anything like that. It's just a normal fence, but it wants to be in reasonable condition because you want to deter people, regardless of what's being grown, from entering the property.
If you think about what they've got in Tassie around the poppy fields,
I heard it's pretty
generally
good.
just normal low fences, and in fact, often you think it's just fences to hang a sign on. They're not used.
I heard differently.
Sorry?
I said I heard differently.
Yeah, no, they're just normal looking fences.
I heard real high
Yeah,
fences.
if you try real hard, you can jump over it.
It can even be a single strand as long as it's
Keeps the stock out.
You can hang a sign off it.
You need to have a sign on it, yeah.
yeah, so you can't walk into it without having to overcome the barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the security thing.
We don't need floodlights over it or anything like that.
Just a couple of security guards.
Just, there's no the term is a fence, so that's a stop-proof fence.
And sorry, it said obligations under the Act, the last point. What's the name of the DPI Act?
It'll be under the Drugs and Poisons Act,
Oh, the Drugs and Poisons Act.
1981.
Jesus, that's pretty young.
Oh, well, so it'll be updated regularly, but it's still, that's its base.
It comes out of the computer, it just probably just rolls over.
So after the seed has been sown, no, sorry, after the site's been cultivated, there are the extra 5 inspections that take place, but there's actually one before that, and it depends where your seed comes from. You need to be able to validate the purity of the seed. Now, if you buy from, I guess if they bought seed from John, for example, it would come with some sort of test certificate.
Yeah. The phytosanitary certificate?
No, well, yes, that's if it's imported from overseas, but if it's coming from intrastate, it's more just a validation of THC levels of the seed.
Blows are about 5.
So then we like to watch it being sown, because we've got nothing better to do. And then
You mean be there when the machine is
sowing, so you could work the weights. Yeah, you said you needed 4 kilograms of seed, so let's see, 4 kilograms of
You
seed.
don't keep half the seed for something else, do you?
Yeah, that's the reason behind it.
I have a question. The cost of you coming out to do that 5, 6 times for those inspections, how much is that cost?
The princely sum of $38.50 per 15 minutes. So if we've got to travel for 3 hours to get there and do the observations and come back, we promise not to charge any more than $616 a day. I think that's right, isn't it, Dan?
I can't remember. I know there is a ceiling.
There's a ceiling. So,
Greg, why are these new regulations? I mean, when we were growing it early on, we didn't have any of this.
because when you were growing it earlier, I think you would have had some of the costs, Davey.
We had very little cost, but we certainly weren't supervised in sowing. We certainly didn't have any of that. So Greg Blewett came out, looked at the land and said, yes, put a fence there.
But that's right, that's when DPI employed Greg Blewett as their hemp agronomist.
Yeah.
Peter, you would have known Greg, wouldn't you? So because he would have been employed at that point as an industry-based officer, extension officer, probably a lot of that was just picked up either by virtue of him being there or him being authorised.
But nobody supervised us sowing. We didn't have any of those.
Adrian, we've got to move along, I'm afraid.
Rick,
Oh, my only comment on this is, if I had to pay DPI $600 for each of those, and you ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would blow. It would blow. Yeah, and I wouldn't. I'd just say forget it.
correct, and I would think that's probably what a lot of people have done.
They'd have to change the legislation.
So do farmers have to go through all of that in other states as well, or is that just Victoria?
No, it's just Victoria.
Just Victoria, and it's new, didn't come in with the original legislation.
$300 I've got no problem with, but the rest I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I think that's one of the
Exactly.
And don't hold this against Greg.
No,
He's got
no,
a job
no,
to
just-
do.
I'm
He's
just
got to
explaining.
work within the parameters of the legislation. Nobody's holding it against Yeah, Greg. no. I'm just pointing it out because it's.
But it's clearly an area which requires.
Grab your
reform.
pitchfork.
Yeah, like abolition.
Well, it's one of those things that I think DPI put a lot of effort in initially, and nothing came out the other end. For some reason or whatever.
It was one of the reasons.
Well, Adrian's saying that there's, to him, the new fees and charges. I've been working with Hemp for DPI since 2003 or 4 or something. Yeah, probably Fred was seeking a...
Well, we were growing crops in
Unfortunately,
96.
Alan's got to get away dead on 3, so if we can
Okay,
move it
so
along, I'm sorry to do this, but
that's the fees. And when you apply for your guideline, for your authority, the major thing is know exactly what you want to do. Be very clear in your own head about what project or whether it's research or commercial, and have a business plan in mind. Because a lot of people start applying and then say, oh, we only want to put in 1 hectare. Well, on those costs and charges, 1 hectare is not going to work for anyone. And it's not going to be a critical mass for John and that sort of thing. Thank you, Lynn. So the main thing is know what you want to do.
okay. Well, thank you for that. We'll need to just swap over computers so you can ask questions of
Actually, while you're swapping over, there's a really good segue into my talk in terms of what was just talked about there. One thing that's in part of my talk is talking about, and my talk's about new industries generally. It's not specifically about hemp. But one of the things that we're forever telling people who are getting into new industries is don't put all your eggs in one basket. You know, the name of the game is diversification. So rather than swapping what you're doing, if you're farming something else, for instance, rather than swapping what you're doing for something brand new, holus bolus, just start small. So give it a go in one small patch. Now, it seems to me that the problem that you've got is that the cost of compliance precludes you from doing that small patch. So I think if you are going to try and make changes to the legislation and lobby people, I reckon a really good angle would be, look, basically what you're saying we have to do is stick our necks out financially and go holus bolus, give up our other farming and pretty well go into hemp 100%. I'm pretty sure that's not the intention of what you want to do, but what you're doing is you're putting us and the regional communities we're in and the economy in our local region and all that at risk. So I think there's a fair argument to be had there that the costs need to come down, or at least have a sliding scale, you know, just so that if you want to have a go in a small patch, semi-commercially, you can.
is there a maximum of how much hemp a farmer can grow? Greg?
No, there isn't.
No?
Just your land that you apply for.
Right, because I had thought, I'd been told that it was a maximum of half a hectare in Victoria.
No.
Okay, so
But
that's
at the moment,
unlimited.
those costs, if you're on a contract with Eco-Fibre, your costs would exceed what you can pay.
Even by group challenge.
I agree.
Thanks.
I don't start with 10.
You know, your local member. Your local member arena.
These things could be covered by random checks.
Yes. You want his phone number? If you're in Western
local
District, we'll give you his phone number.
Any time, so you've got it.
Local DPI.
Can everybody see that? We need light and screen at the same time.
everyone feel all right, or let's start?
Like almost like running a home
First
day.
to watch.
I like to put the other way around.
Why can't we just work out? So,
You had it
Mrs.
right.
Vick, Alan needs to see.
Yeah, but if
I just need to see a bit. Good. It's trying to find it. Which one is it? Just trying to think of Jeff's key. Is it in fact?
I think it's a design.
But you've got to have it in a secure box.
And it's worked very well. It's not
All right, look, I'll just start down because I do have to go and catch a plane at 3 o'clock. Not the plane at 3 o'clock, I have to go at 3. Yeah, look, I'm Alan Davey. What should I say? I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Till 3 o'clock.
At Rurdick, what we do is we deal with a lot of new industries. My job is I deal with new plant industry, and to just put it in perspective, I deal with probably about 60 industries. I'd have about 45-ish active projects at the minute. So the other thing is we've got just a small amount of money to go around, so we try and squeeze every bit we can out of every cent we've got, and it's very competitive. We deal with R&D, obviously, R being research, which is the easy part of it, and D being the development of the industry, and that's the hard part. And quite honestly, that's also the part you need to get right. It's probably where most industries trip up. I'll skip through those ones. Yeah, the thing about new industries, and hemp is no different. New industries generally require a long-term investment. Some are harder to get started than others, and I'd say that you guys and gals, sorry, have really got your hands full in terms of the impediments that you've got to get the industry started in Victoria. The other thing about new industries is they tend to be very high risk. So it's, yeah. I guess the thing is with a little bit of thought and planning, you can probably, I guess, put yourselves in the best position so that you can minimise those risks and have the best chance of success. And I mean, there's a whole lot of industries that various RDCs have worked with over the years, some of which have been very successful. Canola is a really good example. That started in Rurdick a long time ago, or the predecessor of Rurdick. But you know, we've also had our fair share of failures. One thing I will say about the failures though, is that it's generally not down to the agronomy, it's not down to a bad choice of site or species. It comes down to the people who are doing it. If you've got someone who's very passionate about what they're doing, and in fact, all the research managers say this, when you're talking to someone, you've generally got a pretty good idea of whether they're going to make a go of their new industry or not, just based on the person. If they know their stuff, they're passionate and look like they're gonna, you know, give it a real good shake, then they're gonna make it. If they've just seen an opportunity and are jumping on a bandwagon and trying to ride on somebody else's apron strings, well, you know they're probably going to have a bit of trouble. So I guess being passionate about what you're doing is very important, but also that goes into choosing people who are in charge or who you look up to or who are going to coordinate your industry as well. It's very important to have people who do have that passion and are willing to put in the time. By all means. Yeah, it's probably pretty big. It might take a while to load up. It's actually opportune because my next slide
He's coming.
is an important one. Look, I'll skip a bit. There are a few things that you've got to do. There are several things that you need to know and understand, and it's RUDIC's job to sort of help you with it to be successful. And one of them is obviously understanding your market. So knowing what your market is, how big it is, who your potential competitors are, and also identifying if you've got a competitive advantage or not. So can you compete with your competitors, or are they growing their hemp somewhere where the cost of transport, the cost of processing, the compliance costs, and above all the cost of labour are so small? Just bear with me. I'll just rightio. E.N.I.D. Think of it. Look, I sort of apologise for this slide. It's actually aimed at people who are starting out in a brand new industry, so it's blue sky. But still, I'll share it with you because it's a bit of a laugh. Think about the I guess the journey that somebody goes through when they start falling in love with a new industry, which I hope all of you have done because you really need to succeed. And what happens is, you know, you might see it at a field day or read about it or see it on the telly or something. And you start to get a bit excited and you research it and you have a look and you see what the figures are by looking on the internet and you think, gee, that's fairly economical, and you get a bit more excited, and then you realise it can be done in the environment that you're in, and by that time you're starting to break out in a bit of a sweat. And so you go on, and the more that you read about it, the more you're excited about it. I think you may have found just that industry which is going to make a really, really big difference to your life. In the end, you end up with E.N.I.D disease. And what that is exciting new industry disease. And lots of people get it, believe me. It's very similar. By the time you make the decision as to whether you're going to plunge into an industry or not, very often what happens is you're overlooking the obvious and the negatives, and you're concentrating on the positives, and away you go. The funny thing is that lots of people, when they are all excited about the industry that they're in, that's exactly the point where they're at the most vulnerable of being talked out of it. I know that sounds perverse, but that's the way that it works. So if you are excited about your industry, what I'd say is stick with it. In terms of it making a change and a difference to your life, the secret is you have to make sure that it makes a positive difference to your life, and not a negative one. And that's probably what's going to take the most work. I started talking about the markets and I guess understanding what you need to do to be successful in a market, whether it's a domestic market or an overseas market. And I guess that also goes to knowing what price you'd have to produce your product for, or your commodity for, to be competitive with other people who are supplying into the market. So looking at people who are already in the market, what are you going to have to produce your hemp for? Looking at your overheads, looking at what it costs, are you going to be in the ballpark or aren't you? And what can you do? If you're maybe very close to being able to produce it for the price that you need to, what else can you do to improve it? The sort of questions that are asked in this and the previous slide about marketing are also things that RERDIC helps industry with. We do market surveys. We've actually just commissioned a look into the Australian fibre industry. It's a very short study that's just looking at a few specialty fibres and a few opportunities. It involved a marketer, an agricultural economist, and a fibre expert from the CSIRO. Just looking at what's around, what's available, what the processing options are, what the potential markets are. That's going to be coming out pretty soon. And based on what that says, RERDIC will decide whether we want to do more with the fibre industry in Australia or not. My guess is we will. And when we do want to do more with the fibre industry, we'll be holding a workshop to try and get a whole lot of main shakers and movers nationally together to just kick a few ideas around and talk about where the national fibre industry might possibly go. Whether we're talking about a whole lot of individual industries which come under one umbrella, or whether it's worthwhile grouping everybody together. Anyway, you'll all have an opportunity to be involved with that if and when it happens. Next. Look, no doubt the thing we most get involved in, we being RERDIC and other RDCs, is the scientific research around the agronomy of growing the things that need to be grown in a new industry. And we invest in all of these areas. In terms of the agronomy is pretty obvious, although generally what we do, the first bit of research we do would not be throwing a new plant in the ground and seeing how it grows. It'd be telling a researcher somewhere to get on the internet and to have a look at what's been done overseas. So where else has the research been done? What's it shown? Are there any holes in that research which need to be filled? Is there something simple that we can do in Australia to validate what's been done overseas and say, hey, yeah, what they found we think will hold here as well. That cuts a lot of corners. It speeds up the R&D required in an industry, and obviously saves a lot of money as well. It could save you a lot of years of research, and yeah, making the same mistakes people have made in often several other countries for many years. In terms of where you start, what I'd say is it's obviously whatever you do, research and development wise, is going to cost money. We have a little bit of money, but you're going to need a lot more than we can supply, that's for sure. However, you are going to be searching for funds from us and from other areas. And what I'd say is be really organised. Have in your mind what your priorities are, and that's both in terms of your agronomical research requirements, but also in terms of market research and that sort of thing. So you need to decide, and I'd suggest nationally, what your priorities are as an industry. Clearly, in Victoria, you have some priorities above and beyond that, and I'd say the legislative ones are your most important thing to attack now, because without addressing those, you looks like you'll have trouble having the industry. So yeah, I think probably the place to start is a strategic plan, and we've assisted industries do their strategic plans. My guess is you people could probably just about do your own. You know what your priorities are, and you know what needs to be done. Particularly given you've also had some agronomists who we've heard from today that have been working in the industry, for some time. So I think with their help, you probably could get a strategic R&D plan up quite quickly. The beauty of having that plan up is when you go cap in hand for money, applying for grants, applying for R&D assistance, one of the first things people will want to know is what. Let's go back a step. Often what happens when people are applying for funds is it's a scientist that applies for funds on behalf of the industry. So it might be somebody in a uni, or it might be in an ag department who says, look, I'm going to do research on behalf of the hemp industry, and I'm going to do it on genetic fingerprinting, just to see if we've got the same hemp genetics in Australia and the same diversity they've got elsewhere. There's a good example. Whereas for the industry, that might not be a critical priority at all. You might much rather go out and see if you can find more markets. Do a bit of research on what's happening in fibre markets overseas, or research like that. So it's very important when you're going for money to have a strategic plan that the people who are the potential funders can look at the strategic plan and say, oh yeah, there's this application, and yeah, look, it's in the top 3 of the things that's been identified for this industry to do. And if that, quite honestly, is the first step you need to get past when you're trying to get research money. So that's very important. Forget about that one. Oh yeah, back to the thing I said about people. It's very important that you have people with passion in charge of your industry. And it's very important that, I guess, you create a network and are willing to be a part of that network and involved in it, and give something back as well as take information and organisation out of it. Something that is very difficult is for an industry which is organised, as you are, on a state basis, to get funding for a new industry. If you can imagine, if you were to come to Rurdick and say, Rurdick or Howell or anywhere else for that matter, and say, look, we want money to do R&D on our industry, here's our strategic plan, this is what we'd like to do. And Rurdick might go ahead and fund you, and off you go. And then all of a sudden the people in Queensland that grow hemp go, look at that. Gee, they've got funding. Hey, we'll apply to them to do the same thing, so we can get that done in our jurisdiction. And so they'll apply for funding, and they'll put the argument up to the politicians as well. They funded Victoria, so it's only fair that they fund Queensland. And before we know it, we're funding 5 or 6 pieces of identical research around Australia to do the same thing. So the bottom line is, very seldom will state organisations be funded for industry research. Happens occasionally, but not often. So it's really important that you think about how you might be able to organise yourselves nationally. I think it is important. One thing about being organised nationally as well is you're in a fortunate situation. The presence of eco-fibre, I think, is probably a bit of a gelling influence around the country, and I think it's useful that they are on the scene, in that they're a bit of a conduit between growers around Australia. I have no doubt that they won't be the only purchaser of your products in the future. I'm sure there'll be others come along. But hey, while they're around, sorry John, but you know, do make use of them while they're here. What else have we got? Oh, that's just more about networking. Very important that you have whether it's a web presence or a hotline or something, it's very important that you have somewhere where members can, I guess, communicate with each other or receive newsletters or that sort of thing. And again, you may be doing that on a state basis, but it would be marvellous if it could be done on a national basis. And perhaps one of the things that we might help the industry do is try and get a bit of a national presence and perhaps get representatives of all of the states together somewhere, sometime, just to chew the fat and see what comes out. And if a national association gets born out of it, or the seeds of one, well then good. But I think it would do your industry the world of good for that to happen. And this is sort of what I was talking about before. Not putting all of your eggs in one basket. Yeah, don't give up your thousands of hectares of wheat and try and put in thousands of hectares of hemp instead. With new industries, the rule of thumb is start small, give it a go, see if it works, see if you're happy with it. Is the new industry right for your land? And more to the point, are you right for your new industry? The reason that I've got a snail there,
Oh, sorry.
Panadol.
Stretches, so you don't get headaches.
The reason I've got the snail there is in a previous life I used to design and run grant programs for the Federal Department of Agriculture, and one of them was New Industries Development Program. Another one was a thing called the Food Processing in Regional Australia Program, and they funded, I guess, the adoption of innovation in value adding, so in processing industries that were based in rural and regional Australia. And the idea was, instead of regions just settling for farm gate commodity prices, which are really low, if you could value add while the commodity's still in the region, well then the region retains the extra income from the processing of that commodity into something more valuable. And one of the things that we funded, unfortunately, in fact I think I funded a couple of franchises that were based around the snail industry, snails for human consumption. I got heaps of stick for that. Everybody thought it was a great joke and a huge waste of money and hilarious. And generally the way that it worked is it was done on farms where there was something else grown. Often it was sheep and wheat, actually. Some in South Australia, some in New South Wales. There may have been some in Victoria, I'm not sure. And it wasn't always the woman of the household that raised snails, but more often than not it was. So they'd still be growing their sheep and wheat, but in a little paddock just outside the back door, mum or dad would be raising snails for the gourmet industry. And sure, wasn't an awful lot of money that was made. Tens of thousands of dollars. In one case, I think they made about 80 grand a year, which is pretty reasonable for just snails when you think about it. But I had the fortune of coming across some of the people who'd been involved in these industries, and it was the people that were involved, mainly blokes, with the broader wheat, sheep, etc. Part of the farming, part on their farm, who'd talk about what the snail enterprise had meant to them. And I was thinking, here we go, I'm going to be in for stick again, they're going to lay it into me. And the first guy came up and shook my hand and said, look, I never thought I'd ever say this, but if it wasn't for the snails in the last drought, we wouldn't have a farm. And another two of the people who were in the same basket said a very similar sort of thing. So it was the profitability of the snails when there wasn't any feed around for their sheep, when they weren't getting any crops of wheat. It was the snails that kept the wolves away from the door. And I guess that's the thing about new industries. They don't have to make you $1 million or millions of dollars a year. In the end, maybe it's useful enough if they just make the difference between keeping your farm open or having you walk off the land. And look, that's I think pretty well where I'm going to leave it. Except to say, one other thing about R&D is R&D costs a reasonable amount of money. Over the past few years, the amount of money that's been available for research and development for new industries in Australia has diminished. What that means is when you're after money for research and development, and that goes whether it's from us or anybody else, you have to A, have your act together and know exactly what you want, but B, you have to be organised well enough to be able to wrestle up some funds of your own. Now, these aren't funds that we'll take. These are funds that you will put into your research and development, and we'll put our funds into your research and development as well. But if you can imagine, if you're competing against another industry where for every dollar that Verdict puts in, they put in 50 cents or $1 or even $2, you can see that the outcomes from us investing in them for rural and regional Australia are likely to be greater than the outcomes of us investing in another industry where, say, they're putting in nothing. So for every Verdict dollar put in for research, that's all there is. So I guess what I'm saying is to be competitive, you are going to have to be organised enough to be able to find some funds from your own pockets as well. And on that deflating note, I think we'll leave it, except to say, yeah, the most important thing with new industries, they are hard. Sometimes they don't feel like it's worth it, but in terms of being successful, the #1 rule in absolutely everything, like everything in life, is have a crack. And you'll be surprised just what success can bring if you do have a decent crack. And thank you very much.
Alan has to go now, but before he goes, I'd just like to thank him first because, so go. I hope you can take that on the plane. I'm sorry, but I didn't think about it 4 o'clock this morning.
I tell you what,
already bought it.